Welcome back to Celebrity Radio. It's Alex Belfield here, back in Las Vegas at the Venetian Hotel and Casino, and on the side of that is the Palazzo, and it's home to Frank the Man. And the man who is Frank Sinatra, is Bob Anderson. How are you?
I'm good. I feel great. Just did the show. Nice crowd, nice people, and I'm so glad you're here.
It's my pleasure, and I asked to see this show, and I have to start by saying I've got a vested interest that I do adore Frank Sinatra, and I do adore big bands, so I'm already at a positive with this show. Then you come into the theatre, and the curtain goes up, and let's start with the band. I mean, it's phenomenal. There is no band this size anywhere else in show business, is there?
Right. No, not really. And not only that, there may be a band at that size, but certainly not with the quality of what we have. You know, it's extraordinary. And Vince Falcone put a great thing together. You know, he used to contract all the orchestras for Frank as well. So when I went with Vince and I said, I'm going to do this show, Vince, he put together the best players in the country.
And what I love about the score of this is it's not obvious. It isn't every one of Sinatra's biggest hits that's played on the radio every single day. There are surprises, and the show has wonderful light and shade. And again, I presume that's deliberate.
It is deliberate because the one thing that I said when I started this whole writing this show was that I wanted to avoid caricature. I said, this cannot be that. This is not going to be another, you know, like one of these shows where somebody puts a hat on the internet and they turn out to be Frank Sinatra. You know, this has really got to be a sincere, authentic thing. I try to do, when you do caricature, you take away from the authenticity of it. So I really made an effort, you know, not to do that. And, you know, and it's such I used to get up in the morning when I started doing this show. For 2 years, I went downstairs, the lower level of my house, and I had a great big movie screen, like 10 foot by 8 foot, and the whole room was mirrors. The whole room was mirrors. And I would get up, and I had a great sound system, and I had 24 videos given to me from studios in LA, all over New York. They gave me all this stuff. So when I started doing it, I would work 4 or 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. In the morning, at 6 o'clock in the morning, I put a tuxedo on. For 2 years, I did it. 2 solid years, I did it to do this thing and get everything. He was my singer my whole life, but I never thought about really doing this. And I'll tell you another thing real quickly. I'll give it back to you because my wife says your answers are too long. So anyway, so the thing is though that, you know, I don't know how to say it, but I don't know anybody in the world who knows more about the great singers of the American Songbook than me. And everybody in the business will tell you that. They'll say, call Bob, ask him to answer that question. You know, everybody in the business knows that. I've been knowing how great Sinatra was his whole life, but people, when I started doing this, now I know. I learned so much more after so many years. The guy just did everything perfect. I knew that. But now trying to duplicate it and do everything perfect on a consistent basis, I said, you can't do that unless you don't work at it. If I work at it, I can't do it. So it's like when I sit up there, I assume his personality, his persona, and I see the orchestra and listen, and all of a sudden your voice changes and you turn into Frank Sinatra.
It's very interesting when to see you up there. I mean, you come into your own and you walk on stage. Immediately, everybody's going to give you a round of applause. And then we go, okay, then impress us. And of course, the great thing about Frank Sinatra is he wasn't going to impress us. He was Frank, and you take it or leave it. If you start showing off, the gig's over, isn't it? I mean, Frank was so cool. You have to be cooler than him almost to pull it off.
Did you see when I walked on? When I walked back, I took a little short bow. I walked back to the band. Turned around, walked back out, turned back around and winked at him and looked at him a little bit. Yeah, it's not like, you know, I'm in no hurry here. I'm Frank Sinatra. I'll get to what we're going to do in a second. And that's the way it is. And the people in the beginning are looking at you and they're saying, oh my God. But it's like what you said. They're just sitting there saying, I hope this guy can sing. You know,
right.
You know what I mean? That's what they're saying right there. And then, fortunately, I can sing. So when we go out there and that band, you know, you got to be able to swing if you're going to do Frank Sinatra. And you got to be able to swing at a real slow tempo. And you got to be able to swing at an upper tempo. And you got to be able to understand the music that he's doing. And that's the whole thing. And I do. I understand it and I get it. And that's why all these guys came from all over to do this show. They knew how cool it was going to be.
And what's interesting again about your performance is Frank didn't always try and hit the note. He wanted to be just slightly before it or after it or above it or below it. And again, you've even nailed that. There's so many subtleties in this. I don't know whether everybody gets it. It almost doesn't matter.
No, not everybody gets it. They don't get it, but they don't have to. You just said it. You know, the thing about it is that I used to say, when I wrote the whole show together, right in the opening page, I said on there, in 40 years of me performing all over the world in the finest venues, I have never had a single person come up to me and say they didn't like the music of Frank Sinatra. Now, they didn't have to know how good he was. They just liked his music. And they didn't know how good he was. I know how good Frank Sinatra was. And that's why, and the whole thing goes on and says, and that's why I am so honored and humbled to come out and do his music each night.
And doing the show is one thing, but then doing it with his musicians is another. And you kind of feel his soul in the room, and that's rare in Vegas because so many people are impersonating or trying to tribute, and often it's more of an insult than a tribute. Exactly. But I mean, the guys who stood there with him in front, that's putting an incredible pressure on you because if you can't perform, they're going to know, aren't they, within a heartbeat?
Within a heartbeat, but certainly within a rehearsal. You know, they're going to know. And they know, but all of those guys have known me, you know, from years. Vince Falcone was my piano player before he was Frank Sinatra's. And Vinny and I have been working together off and on for 35 years. And I know all those guys because I worked with them in New York and San Francisco and all over the place. And they actually came because they knew that if there's going to be a Sinatra production, and my goal was to say, that it's got to be the quintessential Sinatra show in the world. That's what we have to make this. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. And it was, I'll tell you, the toughest thing about this was the water has been so muddied up by wannabes that, you know, that couldn't swing from the end of a rope. And yet they're trying to do Frank Sinatra and stuff all over the internet. So when you say you're going to do a Sinatra show, the problem with it is, oh, man, come on, I don't want to see another wannabe Sinatra guy. And it's hard to get the people to understand that this is beyond that.
Well, it's also interesting. My last encounter with Frank Sinatra was at the London Palladium. They did a tribute to him in 2006, and I sat there with Frank Jr., and we did a wonderful 40-minute interview, which was fantastic. And then I went to see the show and walked out because it was just creepy to see a live band and hear Frank didn't work. I don't know why, but it didn't. You've got to be very careful with something as precious as a legend, haven't you?
To be honest with you, I think it's an insult to Frank Sinatra and his music. That is a perfect example of somebody just trying to capitalize on his name rather than really doing him justice in his music. I sincerely mean that.
And they're doing it again this year for his 100th.
You took the words out of my mouth. They're doing it again right now. This one here is more like a cartoon thing or something. They're showing a movie, and I mean it's amazing when you do that. That's why I'm saying I want to come to the West End. I want to show them a show and bring this show up there. And my goal is, the goal for this show was, when I wrote it, was to be the must-see show in the Vegas Strip and land it in a major hotel in the center of the Strip. And that's what we did. And I said, but yet be perceived as a musical, as a theatrical production capable of playing the West End and under Broadway. And that's what I'm doing, and that's where we want to go, man.
Well, it's interesting. I came here 15 years ago to Las Vegas and did my first interview, and I came here with the intention of finding people who were incredible stars that you couldn't see anywhere else, and I'm mostly disappointed, is the truth. But then I saw a guy called Danny Gans who blew my mind, and I was very honored to interview him twice. He's since passed away, and he put on a phenomenal show, and I truly have not seen another man on a stage as good as him other than you tonight. That's the truth.
Well, that's very sweet of you to say that. He did bullet things is what he did. You know, he did short things. You know, he'd do, you know, Michael Jackson, he'd go, doom, 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 ooh. And he'd go, doom, doom. She was more like Billy King. I was the one. Okay. And he'd said, well, ooh, and he'd spin around and he'd say, Ella Fitzgerald now. Oop, and then shoot out that, but Danny did 1,000 people of 30 seconds of each one of them, and that was his game plan.
Right.
And God bless him, because Danny Gans made more money as an impressionist, just about anybody except for Rich Little. Danny became the biggest corporate convention act in the world. We were friends, and we go out and sit and talk and drink and have a good time, buddy. Me and Danny and a guy named Fred Travellino was another one, and Rich Little. We'd all get together. Frank Gorshin and John Biner. We'd all get together and have a thing, and it's very, very nice of you for your compliments, because I know what you're talking about. It's something to go out there each night and to be able to perform. I couldn't do it without the things. You saw what surrounded me, and that's why I intentionally did it that way. I said, Bob, if I'm going to do the show that's going to be the top show in the world, I can't do that alone. I'm out there, but I'm in the front of the band, but the charts are all there. They're all the original, and you notice how great they played them. These guys really kick butt. I mean, every single night they swing. They do a ballad that's perfect. Those strings on A Very Good Year, shit, you got to sing after that. When I was 17. If you don't, get off the stage, dude. Come on. You shouldn't be sitting in front of a string section like that.
But you picked out an interesting song there, because there are some that are so huge that we look forward to. Obviously, we want New York, New York, but that song is so subtle and quiet, you can't hide behind it. And as great as the band are, and they are magnificent, again, you've still got to cut through with that voice, with that inflection, with that tone, and you did. And I hope you know that it does come across. And again, I congratulate you on your discipline to do that, because it's not easy, especially when you're doing it over and over again.
Well, thanks again. And here's about that. Let me comment on that for a second. Frank Sinatra was a brilliant actor, okay? A brilliant actor. And what he would do is he knew when to draw upon his acting, and when you do draw upon your acting, what they tell you in acting is that the thing that you're going to, the part you're going to play, you try to relate it to something that happened in your life, and that's what Sinatra did all the time. He really told the story, and if it needed to have a little bit of coloring to it, more coloring, he knew when to give it. He knew when not to. He knew when to lay back. He knew how to make that song touch the heartstrings of the person who's going to be listening to it. He was just that. He was that. That's what I tell you, how tough he is, and that's that's why when I do it like that, A Very Good Year, you can't think about it. You got to just sit down, and when the orchestra. When I hear it, and that last string line holds there, it's so easy to go, when I was 17. I mean, you got to say it, man. I mean, they're making you say it, if you can say it.
Right.
That's the thing.
So when did you wake up one morning and it went from being a script and a piece of music to it being a performance and it being in you? Because that must take time.
It did take time, but what I had to do was to get the people to invest into my project. I had to, when I wrote a business plan, you had to write a script with it and say, this is what I'm going to do. Because I said, what are you going to do, man? Well, you want all this money here? What are you going to do? Well, this is what I'm going to do, and here's the script. This is how it's going to go. Well, as soon as I got the money, I tore the script up and kept going. When they come in and say, hey, that wasn't in the script. I said, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's going over fine, man. So, no, but what, you do that, but I find the audience, you can't just stand up there and sing his songs. They're coming to see what I'm selling, and that is Frank Sinatra. They want to experience a little bit. Here's the reason I did it, was for the younger generation to leave their their world of the high-tech gadgetry stuff that they're in and drop back to circa 1965 and experience how life used to be and lay back for an hour and a half. And when I find I have so many young people that come up to me and they said, oh my God, when that overture started and the curtain opened up, we couldn't believe what we heard. They had never experienced anything like that. So my whole goal was to allow them to be able to hear that and to enjoy it and to keep his music passed on to all generations like that. We got to keep his music going. Not only his, the music of the Great American Songbook, of which he was the #1 contributor as a vocalist, and Johnny Mercer was as a composer.
And here we are in the 100th year. He would have been 100 in December, and his music seemingly is as strong as it ever was. There are people who keep it alive, like Michael Bublé and those guys who are bringing it back in the charts, and it can't hurt because they're bringing it to new audiences. And then they can come and see someone like you, because even Bublé hasn't got that orchestra. I'm sure he'd die for your orchestra, and he could do a lot with it. But again, you've been given that chance. You must pinch yourself, because this is rare. I mean, even in the West End, they ain't giving you that orchestra. They can't afford it.
No, but I'm going to be able to afford it when I go there. So I'm bringing the orchestra, or I'm not coming, and that's the way it is. Because that's why I don't want to be another, they've seen that, done that. No, you haven't seen this. And that's why when I came to this hotel, they said, Bob, you can do this with a big band. You don't need the strings. I said, no, I need the strings. They said, well, it's going to cost. I said, listen, let's work it out, or I'm not going to do the show.
Good for you.
That's exactly what I told him. I said, because that's not what this is about. Yeah. This is an authentic reenactment of an evening with Sinatra. So how do you leave the strings out? How do you do It's a Very Good Year and Guess I'll Hang My Tears Out to try and all these wonderful songs, My Heart Stood Still, or My Way without the strings? Yeah. The whole thing. So I said, you can't do it. So, and that's what I'm doing with this show. That's why I say it's the quintessential production of Frank Sinatra in the world, because I know what's out there. You just got through telling me again about the second time they did that show in London. The show that I saw on Broadway, Twyla Thorpe's show, the great dance choreographer, she choreographed a show it was called Come Dance With Me, which is Frank's Hey There Cutes, put on your dancing boots and come dance with me. Okay. What did she do? They took Frank Sinatra, they put tracks on Broadway and to her dancers, and they just put his picture up there behind him with tracks on Broadway with Twyla Thorpe's group dancing to his songs. Well, that lasted about a month and a half on Broadway, and then my good friend next door brought it in, Steve Wynn. He brought it to his place. Lasted another month and a half, and it died. So that wasn't it. I do think Bublé, who's an exceptionally great singer, wonderful singer. But did you ever notice something about all these singers like Bublé, who's above these other guys at singing this type of music? But when you get Rod Stewart and you get all the others that have done Sinatra music, when you play his songs, you do his arrangements. It's like if you change his arrangements, nobody associates the fact that you're doing that song and it belonged to Sinatra. When Bublé does I've Got You, it's I've got you under my skin. Same as Sinatra's. They all do, because you can't top it. And if you ain't going to do it that way, don't do it, because it doesn't work unless you're Mel Torme and you do it your own way.
But there's one other factor in there that we haven't discussed. It's telling the story of the song. And I think that's something that you're masterful at. And this is where we'll leave it, because I've been far too gushing with you. I need to go and find somebody else to insult at this point.
Yeah, please.
But the truth is, your storytelling within these numbers is phenomenal. And around me were people probably much older than me, and I know you took them back, and it's incredibly moving to hear these songs scream so loud, because the words are often lost. Certainly in a rock concert, you're not listening to the words, you're looking at the set and you're looking at the flashing lights. The words of these songs are so magical, and again, the way you tell it must have taken forever to get that phrasing, because they all say of Sinatra, he was the king of phrasing. You can't mess with that.
No, you can't. You can't mess with it. And then again, you're exactly right. If you do mess with it, then people are going to listen to it and they're going to say, wow, that isn't how Sinatra did it. And you can't do that. I know how much liberty you can take in each one of his numbers, because he did that. He took a liberty. But you can't go further than what he did, or you are turning it into something that you don't want it to be. Because too many Sinatra aficionados, like yourself, would catch that if I did that. And I specifically did not. The storytelling is to set up and bring the people into the mood of what you're going to deliver them on now. I'm not Frank Sinatra, so I got to do, it's got to be set up to where I got to take these people down this road, and they got to believe it and dig the ride. And like Tony Bennett came in and he told me, he said, listen, I'm going to tell you something, all right now. You had me after the first song. He said, it was it, one song and you had me. Now I'm going to tell you real quick on what he did. And she was here. He came downstairs. Here's what he said to me. You know what? He said, you walked off the stage tonight and nobody even knew your name. You can't do that. He said, they heard you, they never even heard what you sing like. You came here and just did the greatest singer in the world, he said, for an hour and a half, never come out of character. And the people are saying, oh my God, I wonder what this guy sings like. And he left and I don't even know his name. So he says, here's what I want you to do. He said, Tony Bennett's been a great friend of mine for my whole career. He said, listen, here's what you're going to do. I want you to take your tie off right before you do that last song. He said, now immediately you're not Sinatra, because he's never taken his tie off on the stage in his life. So it's going to disconnect you from who you think you're trying to be. That's exactly what will happen. Turn around and say to the crowd, there'll never be another Frank Sinatra. And say then, my name is Bob Anderson, and they're going to roar. And he said, and after you do that, tell them about what you did here. Tell them that how humbled you are, and to go out there and how thrilled you are to be able to represent this artist's music to all these people. And that's what I did. And he said, then at the end, tell them you're going to sing a song as yourself. And it's about the song that really represents Sinatra the best, and do it as yourself. They want to hear what you sing like. And if you do that, they're going to jump to their feet at the end. And man, he's been right every single time. And he emailed me the whole script, and I put it in my whole show.
It's a beautiful moment within the show. I have 3 regrets in life. I never got to sleep with Marilyn Monroe. I never got to fly on Concorde, and I never got to see Frank Sinatra. But tonight, it's the nearest I'm ever going to get, and I thank you for that. I again repeat, the greatest show I've seen in years, and you are certainly the greatest headliner I've seen in many years, and certainly my greatest headliner this year. Bob Anderson, thank you for your time.
Man, what a beautiful interview, and I can't thank you enough.